Hoy hoy, this is Tommy with my good friend Martin, who has invited me to review another 90s cartoon with him, except this one started technically in 1989 and has well proceeded past a 90s cartoon. It's a little obscure show, you might have heard of it, but we like to do some deep cuts not many people have heard of. We might talk about, Martin, we might talk about, have you heard about The Simpsons?
I think you mean the Simpsons.
I think he's talking to you.
I
But
have heard of the Simpsons. I believe it was it came out sometime after Family Guy and ripped off quite a few of their ideas, if I'm
yeah,
correct.
yeah, they saw Family Guy and they're like, okay, we can put a spin on this.
And they even went to the effort of making the animation look older to try and get away with
To
their
try
con.
oh wait. So, we want to talk about season one exclusively of The Simpsons because we touched upon what a experimental and strange place it was at. It really didn't become The Simpsons as we ever knew them until a little bit into season two, and there's a lot of oddities and just fun things to touch on in that regard.
Yes, a very different tone to the rest of the series, I think.
I think the most tonally different thing is that I think episode three is when they're like, well, Homer's gonna kill himself.
Yes, some very some very experimental storylines in the first season, and some
Like,
very weird sounding voice acting from
come on.
mostly from Homer.
Come on, Art, we have to get some frosty chocolate milkshake.
It's such a bizarre. It's just Walter Matthau doing like, and I think they said they did base him on Walter Matthau, but it's so weird to listen to. It's like a completely different character. Like they killed Homer after the first season and then just replaced him with someone else.
Marge just happily remarried, exactly.
To
And that
another
does
Homer.
make
Yes.
it just makes a lot of sense because Homer really is such a different character in voice and in just overall persona. He's just a lot more curmudgeonly and more like cranky. Like he's definitely dim-witted, but he's more cranky than he is like stupid as he is in later seasons, as he would be known for.
You'd better get this all out of your system right now. I don't want you embarrassing me at my boss's picnic. Marshmallow.
Yes, he definitely seems to struggle with. He struggles more with being family man and father than he does with everyday tasks that he just turns to wacky antics. Like, season one Homer's difficulties are supporting the family financially, and season whatever they're on now, like 30, season 30's Homer's problems is a giant elephant crashing through the house and he has to feed it for a week. Although that's a part of a season 6 episode, so that's probably not fair. What would be a season 30 episode? I haven't watched it for years.
There's one where he
aliens move into the house. There we go.
there's one where he gets into Pokemon Go.
Well, there you go. That's Jesus Christ.
It was really weird. It's this new clip, and Homer is just kind of, playing with his phone. And it was right when Pokemon Go was big. So they couldn't have, planned that while they were animating it. So you can tell they just pulled together Homer tapping his phone and just putting in some low clips of Dan Castellaneta naming off Pokemon. So you just get this awkward looking shot of Homer, looking at his phone and saying, Drowsy, Rattata, Butterfree.
What you got on your phone there, son? Is that the new Pokemon Go app?
Where's the frosty chocolate milkshake Pokemon? Boy.
Or the happy little elves go?
The happy little elves. That would be a thing. I think the best way I can compare proto Homer to Homer as we know him is at the end of the Babysitter Bandit episode where all the cops are flooding in and Homer goes, "Oh, I'm just not that bright." Whereas, I think probably season 5, 6, 7 Homer, one of my favorite gags is he starts a fire and doesn't notice and starts to sing, "I am so smart, I am so smart, SMRT."
he's painted as very much an everyman, which I suppose he is in later episodes. But he's more of a, I don't know. He rarely seems to succeed. No, he does seem to succeed more than he does later on, but through stupidity. And he's more the hero than he is later on, I think, in certain ways. Like, the show tries to get you to root for him rather than laugh at him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. And I think he still definitely wins through sheer dumb luck. Like when he gets the
Yeah.
position in Homer's Odyssey, is something that I could still see happening to new Homer, but just being less aware of it. Like he thinks he earned it, whereas this Homer's like, I kind of know that I won just through like sheer luck.
Yes. He seems more aware. He's more self-aware, I think, in these episodes, isn't he? Like, he is aware that he is kind of a failure of a man in certain
Completely.
degrees.
And
And he sort of embraces that, and he will fully admit it, and Marge will understand him for it.
And speaking of Marge, her role gets a little bit like there's an episode in this first season where Marge gets drunk at a function and embarrasses Homer, which is a plot that would repeat reversed many, many times, and that's just bizarre to see
Yeah.
too.
I don't want to alarm anyone, but I think there's a little alcohol in this punch.
Yeah, that was such a weird moment, because that is absolutely the plot of a later episode where they go to a country club and Homer gets drunk and embarrasses Marge. That's like every episode.
I think of that great Chanel Suit episode. Is that the one you're thinking
Yeah.
of? And then
Yes.
I also think of Maud, could you get me a peanut?
Yes, a perfect example. Like, you couldn't imagine the roles reversed, and Marge being, Ned, could you get me a peanut? And like Homer being horrified in the background. Marge, what are you doing? Yeah. Some very strange role reversals. And Marge seems like actively depressed in this season, I've
Oh,
noticed. When she rings up Dr. Marvin Monroe, and she just breaks down into tears because she's so unhappy with her life. I was like, oh my god.
right.
Well, when we were dating, he was sweeter and more romantic and 40 pounds thinner, and he had hair and he ate with utensils.
I feel like this is a Marge who, because of her depression, is inclined to temptation because you've got like Jacques and the drinking, whereas later Marge is depressed because she's so resistant to cutting loose.
Yes, later Marge has made her peace with with her lot in life, and she's suppressed all of these emotions. She gets them all out on the Dr. Marvin Monroe show, and she never speaks of them again.
I guess at times like this, all you can do is laugh.
That actually sounded quite a bit like Dr. Marvin Monroe. The impression you just did of Marge.
Marvin Monroe, everybody's long tenured favorite classic character.
We're watching this. I really enjoyed Dr. Marvin Monroe. A very
I-
underrated character.
I hope you did, because you're not seeing him again.
No, well, you see it. Well, when he's dead, you'll.
That's
Well, he comes back from the dead, doesn't he? Because I was listening to the commentary on the Babysitter Bandit episode in preparation for this, and they talk about how they didn't. Matt Groening, I think, just didn't like him because his voice was annoying. So they just made a joke about him dying. But then there's an episode in season, I don't know, like season 20, we'll say, where he turns up on a chat show, and they're like, Dr. Marvin Monroe, I thought you were dead. And he's like, no, I was just very sick.
oh.
And then they just play it off.
This is not the way to get healthy!
That doesn't surprise me. If a death isn't for heart, like say Bleeding Gums Murphy, they tend it's well more in the later episodes when the writers kind of just say fuck it. They tend to be very revolving door with their mortality. Like there's this ongoing mystery as to the whereabouts of Uder and whether or not he's dead.
Oh, yeah, Uda.
Uder.
Hmm.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, this season is kind of full of characters that are like kind of experimental, and you don't really see like they treated Jacques like he would continue to show up. He's in the revamped intro when Bart skates past him, but you
Oh
really
yeah.
don't hear from him again outside of his cameo in the Pin Pals episode.
Yeah, he never comes back, does he? It's strange that you don't see Jacques again. Because it
It's not
feels like he would have been some sort of recurring nemesis or something for Homer
there's
in these
not
early
really like
episodes.
a Casanova Don John character in Springfield, is there?
I don't think so. I can't think of one. No, he would have filled that hole. You could have
Yeah,
easily imagined Jock of all these characters being the regular who would show up and just be sort of sleazy and try to steal people's wives.
completely. So that's a little. I wonder if there was a bit like if someone didn't like him, or I remember speaking of Family Guy, they killed off Cleveland's wife because her voice was just hard to do, and sometimes I just wonder if it's small things like that, if the accent was just too straining.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe it's just people don't enjoy doing the voices for a long period of time.
But that doesn't
He
explain how
shows up in
Marge
the.
has persisted.
Yeah, that's true. And Patty and Selma sound even worse in this series. That sounds like such a horrible thing to do to your vocal cords.
I'm sure. Is that Julie Kavner doing them as well?
She does all the Bouviers, yes.
I thought so. She's been. If you listen to like a recent season, like I'm only caught up on these because I listen to a lot of podcasts about how bad the new seasons are. And if you watch like a season 30 episode with Marge, Julie Kavner's poor vocal cords are just annihilated after decades of being Marge.
Yeah, I mean, she's always sounded quite Marge-esque in real life anyway, hasn't she? I think when you see her interviewed. But yeah, I agree. It definitely has taken its toll. I mean, maybe she just smokes a lot of cigarettes. Perhaps the voices don't impact her that much. But yeah, she doesn't sound well anymore.
I'll share my lighter, sweetie pie.
Looking forward to the harrowing season 31 episode in which Patty and Selma both die of lung cancer.
I
I'm sure that's on its way.
I think there is a new episode era. It's a play on Duffless in that it's titled Puffless, and they try to give up smoking, and it resets to zero.
Well, that sounds like a reasonable episode plotline.
More than Homer getting into Pokemon Go.
Yes. I could easily imagine there being like a season 7 episode about Paddy and Selma trying to give up smoking.
Yeah,
And
it's a
that
very
being funny.
grounded conflict.
Yeah.
The reason I look unhappy is that tonight I have to see a slideshow starring my wife's sisters. Or as I call them, the gruesome twosome.
Oh, Homer. So, the truth comes out.
I don't know when you first like what was the first episode of The Simpsons that you watched, and was it
Oh,
from season 1?
so that's I have such a bizarre history with The Simpsons because bear in mind I'm a baby. I'm only 23. So by the time I was born, Simpsons, like as it was being created, was already what people considered to be bad. So I caught reruns on cable, and it would be all the new stuff mixed with the old stuff, and I enjoyed it all. I have a very distinct memory in my head of being in my basement with my mother, and I was way too young to be watching The Simpsons, but I was channel surfing, and I came across The Simpsons. It was specifically the gag with, like, the Comic-Con thing where the announcer refers to C-3PO as the gay robot from Star Wars. And my mom changed the channel and was like, you shouldn't be watching that. No. So for many years, I was always really mystified
The
by The
children
Simpsons.
cannot discover that C-3PO is gay.
I
We
know.
must change the channel immediately. They're too young.
Exactly. And then, and then when I finally, the first full episode I watched that kicked me into my obsession was, I believe, Sideshow Bob's Last Gleaming. I have this super distinct memory in my head of the part where Milhouse is in the cockpit of the plane going, ta-da-da-da-da, take that, Mom! And that's like the moment where my parents let out this sigh of resignation, like, he has to discover it at some point, I guess. And from
Kids
then
have to
on,
learn about The Simpsons sooner or later.
yeah. And from then
It's
on,
like
I was
Tech Wars.
and from then on, I was just a diehard Simpsons head. Like, And I only kind of recently cultivated my viewing to the first 10 or so seasons because I began to recognize that rift in quality. Because growing up, it was all just Simpsons to me, and it was all so new to me.
Sure. I mean, strangely, the first episode of The Simpsons I saw was the first episode of The Simpsons. Um, so Simpsons roasting on an open fire was actually the first episode of The Simpsons I ever watched.
And they didn't even intend that in any way, shape, or form, because we mentioned in the Biker Mice podcast that that was not at all the initial first episode.
Yes, very true. It was it the first in production,
Well,
or was
kind
it the
of.
first one they animated, or was it the first one that?
So, the Babysitter Bandit episode was the first one finished, and well, it was supposed to be the first one aired, but they didn't like how
Ah,
it looked, so they sent it back. So I suppose Roasting on Open Fire could have been finished, or they just kind of rushed that one together to air it instead. I'm not entirely sure of the logistics there.
because the Simpsons did not come out over here until mid '90s, I think.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I definitely did not watch this in 1999.
Oh, I had no
Because
idea. Okay.
yeah, I think it must have been like nine. I'm gonna say 95, maybe, or 90, maybe even later than that. Um,
Wow.
so we didn't get it until very late on. I think in the '90s, mid '90s to late '90s.
He's frequently absent from school, then gives teachers pathetic excuse notes that are obviously childish forgeries when compared to.
I've noticed there's a lot of villains in this first season who are actively the antagonists of the episodes that they appear in.
Right.
Which is unusual for The Simpsons because there's usually just you get like Mr. Burns,
Sideshow
shows up a
Bob.
couple of times per season. Oh yeah, or Sideshow Bob like once per season. But there isn't really any other villains. In
You
this
can,
one, you've got like the Babysitter Bandit, the French guys. You got Jacques, you got Sideshow Bob.
Nelson kind of has
Nelson,
his first
yeah.
big appearance too, and a lot of like those villainous characters either disappear completely or they just kind of meld into the cast and become occasional friends, if not villains.
Yeah.
Dude.
Like Nelson is much more overtly villainous in this first season.
Oh yeah.
Um,
You're made me
but later
play
on
my
he's
own
just
slide.
yeah, I mean he's terrifying as well.
Yeah, they did a good
He is
job.
in this first one. Yeah, and all the villains are sort of, as you say, sort of ghoulish caricatures.
Seriously.
The way the Babysitter Bandit is animated is terrifying.
I would honestly really love to see like a Sideshow Bob Babysitter Bandit team up of some kind. That actually sounds kind
That
of
would
fun.
be amazing.
Bart. 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 Time to brush your teeth, wash your face, and say your prayers.
And it's a little it's like and it's lighter and darker. It's just got these it's got
Yeah.
the same extremes just in different areas. I think
Yes.
I distinctly remember when Homer's gonna kill himself, he's carrying the boulder across the street, and these two old people that we like never see again are just like,
Oh, I think you do see them again.
oh, do
'Cause
we?
I had this exact same thought, and that woman shows up in another episode when she's moving house. And she's
Oh,
trying to sell the house, and she's like, "Would you please tell your husband not to sit outside? He's putting off the people who are trying to buy the house."
it isn't like it's January. Can you put away your Halloween decorations? There's like rotting pumpkins.
That's it. I'm
And
sure she's
Homer's
called
like,
Mrs.
No.
Yeah. I'm sure it's Mrs. I want to say Mrs. Winfield or something.
That tracks.
I'm maybe remembering that wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no,
they're the
she
ones that
creeps
look at
me
him,
out.
aren't they? Yeah.
And she's like, looks like old man Simpson's about to kill himself. And her cohort, I'm assuming maybe husband, is like, no, maybe he's just taking his boulder for a walk. And they just laugh as Homer approaches his fate.
Oh, looks like young Simpson is going to kill himself.
No, maybe not. Maybe he's just taking his boulder for a walk.
That's a horrible moment.
Ugh.
I mean, a more subtle one that I thought was equally unpleasant is when Patty rings the house in the first episode, and she's like, "Can I speak to Marge, please?" And Homer's like, "Who is this?" "Marge." "Who may I say is calling?" "Please put Marge on the phone." And it's like they won't even dignify him with a response. That's such a horrible moment.
I know.
They're such awful people. Like, there's no nuance to Patty and Selma in this season. They are not. There's no sympathetic plotline about Selma wanting children or Patty fearing dying alone. Oh no, that was also Selma. Selma gets all the plot lines. Patty doesn't really get much to do. But there's no like. They're not three-dimensional characters in this first season. They're just terrible, terrible people.
Well, is it like one of them gets a baby and the other Jub, right? Or is that both to one?
One gets a. I think that again. That is Selma again. Selma gets both those things.
Regardless, there are a couple of my favorite characters on the show. Homer versus Patty and Selma being another just such a great episode. Like when he takes the cigarette bullet for them, that's a weirdly like hardish moment.
Yeah, that's a very good episode.
And this is all the mail that awaited us upon our return. And this is Selma dropping off our vacation film to be developed. Thus concludes our Mexican Odyssey. Very thorough.
Flanders is quite a different character as well. He doesn't come across as. I don't think they even mention him being religious.
No, and that's where the term Flanderization comes from. It's blowing up one trait. And they kind of consider him the epicenter of it, is his religion. Whereas in this one, he was just kind of harmlessly kind and Homer hated him.
You almost get the feeling, well, I did when I watched these episodes, that Flanders is like being overly patronizing in like a smug a smug sort of way rather than just being oblivious.
Totally, yeah, I can see that. And then in the barbecue episode where Homer's embarrassed by his family, there's that family in that car that he's jealous of, and they like float up to heaven. And that would have been Flanders in a later episode, but they just kind of didn't do it.
Yeah, it's that scene where they bump into each other, where they've been doing the Christmas shopping, and Flanders is like, "Oh, let's see which ones are mine. That one's mine. That one's mine. That one's mine." Homer's just like, "They're all yours."
The bit that sticks on my head is Todd going, "Mr. Simpson, you dropped your pork chop. Wait.
Homer Simpson, at last we meet."
I know one of the other notable voice acting changes is Chris Larter is Mr. Burns, and I think Moe in just the first episode. Chris Larter of Cobra Commander fame.
Wow, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't know if they went back and re-recorded with Harry Shearer doing them later on, and Harry Shearer and Hank Azaria doing those voices later on. But I know Chris Larter did do them at some point, and they sound very. I think it was just Harry Shearer was so good at imitating Chris Larter that they sound pretty much exactly the same.
You could fool me into thinking it's either situation, because I could think to myself, "Oh, that's just an earlier interpretation," or "That's just a totally different guy."
Yeah. And he sounds great as Mr. Burns. And he sounds great as Moe as well. Like, if he came up with those voices, it's weird that they couldn't keep him on and get him to do more, because he does a perfectly good job.
Moe seems like
Harry Shearer
a much nicer guy in season 1. Like, he's just kind of like, come on, Homer, it's not that bad. You know, he actually gives like genuine advice before he becomes this like deplorable degenerate later on.
Yeah. He gives Homer that good marriage advice, doesn't he? He's like, "You're gonna take Marge out, you're gonna give her a nice meal, and then you're gonna stay overnight in a hotel, if you know what I mean." That sounded nothing like him, but that's what he says. And it's so bizarre too. Like, later season Moe would be like, "Homer, you're not getting on with Marge no more, eh? Well, maybe she'd like to marry me instead." And then he'd like engineer some plan to kill Homer or something.
Yeah,
so he can marry Marge.
One of my most like memorable post-classic Mo moments is that there's an episode where Marge admits she lied in a contest, and Mo is in the crowd. He just goes, "Oh yeah, Marge and I are both going to hell."
I do enjoy later season Mo, but I think early season, more grounded Mo is a superior character. Just
And the
due
season
to
was saved by, oh, let's say Mo.
I wonder at what point Mo goes from being like a reasonable businessman who has some dodgy deals going on to just a sad, depressing creep. There's a definite. I don't even feel like there's a transition. It's just suddenly they started writing him that way.
I think you can trace it to when he frees the pandas from the back of his bar.
It's weird. I was literally picturing that moment in my mind as you said that.
Barney's a pig, Larry's a pig. We're all pigs. Except for one difference. Once in a while, we can crawl out of slop, hose ourselves off, and act like human beings. Buy your wife some flowers and take her out for a night on the town. Candles, tablecloth, the whole 9 yards.
Gee, a romantic evening. Nah, she's too smart to fall for that.
Smithers being very tanned.
Tan
Suddenly just popped
Smithers.
into my head. Tan Smithers. He'd just been away on vacation for a while.
Yeah.
He was extremely tanned when he got back.
Right, I think they do. I can't remember. I think I did like just Simpsons' original design was a black man, and then for whatever reason they decided to change it, so they just hand wave that he was on vacation in that first episode.
Yeah. It changes very quickly as well, though, doesn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
like you see him again in season 1, and he's already got his normal design.
Like the next time you see him, yeah. I wonder. This might be in bad taste, but I wonder if it was like decided that having a like a servile black man would be in bad taste
Yeah, I was
to
thinking
Mr.
the same
Burns.
thing. Yeah. Because he will treat Smithers like a slave, so maybe that was not a connotation that they wanted on the show, perhaps.
And kind of, did you hear about all the voice actors just now dropping their, like, every white person playing a black person on The Simpsons just decided they're gonna give up those roles?
Yeah.
That's bizarre. It's kind of, and
Well,
like,
you know, they're in their like 70s and 80s now. Maybe they just want less work.
I know. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just kind of a vehicle for guys. Dan might not be homework for like much longer. I don't know what to tell you.
I feel like Dan and Hank are like the youngest members of the cast, aren't they? I think
Probably.
compared to everyone else. Like,
I'd
I
wager.
think Harry Shearer is actually as old as Mr. Burns in canon now. So
Smithers. And it was 30 years ago he recorded that excellent hip-hop beat that I reintroduced you to not too long ago.
look at all those idiots.
Yeah.
Look at all those idiots.
I feel like do it, do it, do it was like supposed to be his early catchphrase because he says that like 2 or 3 times, including in that song. But I'm kind of glad they switched to excellent.
Look at all those idiots. Oh, look at all those boobs. An office full of morons. A factory full of fools. Is it any wonder that I'm singing the blues?
What would you say is your favourite episode of season 1?
I think the Crepes of Wrath for just how bizarre and depressing it is. It has that great bit of, you two quiet down. Maybe Lisa's right about America being the land of opportunity. Maybe Adu is right about capitalism being fueled by the blood of the workers.
Yeah. That is a strange one. I think Krusty Gets Busted is my favourite episode of the first season.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. With-
I think that's the one that I rewatched the most. 'Cause I remember I used to have, when I used to tape The Simpsons off the TV on good old VHS, I had a like a special tape for all the Sideshow Bob episodes. So I wanted them in order. So I used to have like from Krusty Gets Busted up until I think the Cecil episode. And that was my like chronological Sideshow Bob.
Those
It was
were
a
the ones you
nightmare
needed.
because you had to wait until for the right sequence of episodes so you could tape them. It was an incredibly delicate operation.
Now, I'm curious if they aired in the wrong order. Like, if there was Sideshow Bob's Last Gleaming before Cape Fear, did you like have to wait for the next one?
Yes.
Ah, that
That tape
sucks.
had to sit on my shelf until the right moment, and this is when I would check like TV guides to see which one would be on.
That is a level of devotion. I applaud you.
Yes. uh, yeah, I made my own cover for the tape with the little Sideshow Bob sticker.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, should have kept them. They would have
Yeah.
been worth millions.
um, yeah, I was talking about Crepes of Wrath. Yeah, I feel like, and there was like some
Here's the
like
crepes, and here's the wrath.
splat. Oh god, that caught me off guard.
Just suddenly popped into my head.
Yeah, I feel like there's some Les Mis in there. There's some weird hatred of French people because even
Yeah.
the cop that saves Bart doesn't care until he mentions the antifreeze.
Yeah. Antifreeze in the wine, that is a terrible crime.
Ungrateful swine! We give you food, we give you shelter, and this is how you repay us!
So, final thoughts? Would you recommend The Simpsons Season 1 to the one person in the world who probably hasn't watched it yet?
I'd say, within this season, you'll find good and bad episodes. So you could say it was the best of Simpsons. It was the blurst of Simpsons. Um, yeah, I see. You know what? If you're just now getting on Disney Plus and you've been using Simpsons reaction pics and memes for all these years, but haven't watched it in order, go get started. Go do it. Fun stuff.
I envy the person who has never watched The Simpsons until this point and now has 27 seasons. Well, no, I don't envy them actually. I I envy the person who has enough money to pay for the amount of time it takes for them to get Disney Plus and watch seasons 1 to 9 and then stop. That is the person that I envy.